So I see some of you guys out there really wanting me to review an Image title. Which one should I review? What's going on, everybody? It's Edwin back again for Strictly Comics, and I actually gave you guys the option to choose what you would like for me to review. And the viewers have spoken. What was the title that you guys really wanted me to review? Well, this was the most popular that was suggested. I will be reviewing The Fuse, issue number 1 by Image Comics. I want to give a shout out to JCSEIJI. I'm really sorry, man. I really don't know how to pronounce your name. CG. I'm sorry. I'm just butchering it. I also want to thank Sleepy Reader 666 because he also suggested an Image title. And I also want to thank the Comic Book Chronicle because they also wanted me to review The Fuse number 1. Thank you so much, guys, for volunteering and participating with your suggestions on what you think I should review. The Fuse is written by Anthony Johnston. Anthony Johnston is actually the same writer that writes Umbral, also for Image Comics. Didn't really care too much for Umbral. Bought issue number 1, didn't buy issue number 2. The artist for The Fuse number 1 is Justin Greenwood. The Fuse is a detective story. And more specifically, The Fuse is a detective comic book. And even more specifically, The Fuse is a sci-fi cops detective comic book. The Fuse was actually really good, you guys. The artwork, not really that great. It was probably average to me at best. I really didn't care much for the artwork, although the artwork did do a good job of telling the story, which is really what an artist's main goal is when drawing and doing artwork within a comic book. Our main characters in The Fuse number 1 is a detective by the name of Clem. Clem is Russian. He is a Russian detective. And we also have Dietrich. Dietrich is also Russian, if I'm not mistaken. He spent, I think, 3 years as a detective in Russia. He wanted to volunteer his skills and be a detective on The Fuse. Well, what is The Fuse? The Fuse is this gigantic space station that is hovering in orbit over the Earth. Way over the Earth, much higher than a regular satellite. You guys probably can't see it, but as right here on the cover, this is the Earth. This first line over is low orbit. This next one is global positioning satellite orbit. And then this one right here is where the Fuse orbits over the Earth. And right there in the middle, it's actually the Fuse, which is supposed to be this gigantic space station. It's more or less like a giant city in space. And the reason why this giant city is in space is not clearly given to us, at least not in this first issue. This comic book kind of reminds me a little bit of Total Recall. It's definitely a sci-fi. It takes you into a futuristic Earth. For whatever reason, they had to create another place that could be populated with people. I have no idea, but the reason really isn't given to us. What happens in this comic book is that in the very beginning, we get what's called a cable. Cables are basically like homeless people that live within the walls and the crevices of the Fuse. And what happens is that a cable shows up out of nowhere in front of a crowd of people and just falls over dead. Well, the entire story revolves around this cause of death, this crime scene, if you will. And so our two detectives are immediately thrown into this case, this crime, and they're immediately seeking to solve the cause of death and figure out what has happened. What happened is that the cable was actually shot in the stomach by some weapon, not really sure, because projectile weapons are not really allowed on this space station because you pretty much put everybody in danger. They seek to solve this crime and figure out what the heck is going on. Well, while they are looking for answers and clues and trying to do their best to solve this case, you get to know a little bit about each of our characters. You get a little bit of an origin story. You find out that Dietrich is, he spent 3 years in Russia. And we also see other languages being implemented in this book. although they don't let you know, like, hey, this is the Russian language. They expect you really just to get it because it's called the fuse. On the front of the comic, it says the Russian shift. What it means by the Russian shift is it means that the shift of detectives that are currently on duty is the Russian shift. And it seems to be a multi-international station because they also have an American shift. And the American shift, there's a lot more workers. The Russian shift, it's just our two characters and that's it. You get into this origin story, there's this character development. So the author and the artist tries to create this connection between its readers and the characters, and they do a decent job of it. I was actually enjoying the book because it was a detective sci-fi murder mystery. It definitely had me engaged with the book, and I was definitely curious and wanted to know what happened. Well, when we get to the end of the book, in the very last page, we get another Cable that shows up dead, and it's actually the first Cable in which showed in the very first pages of the comic, and he shows up dead as well. I will definitely be picking up number 2 just to see what happens. I'm really hoping that it turns out to be a great read. I will encourage you guys that if you pick up this book, read the back pages of this comic book and get some inside information behind what was put together for this comic book. So, what do I give the Fuse number 1? The story was good. The artwork was not so good. I want to say I give the Fuse number 1 a 4 out of 5. It's definitely worth buying. It's definitely worth reading, and I will be picking up issue number 2. It was definitely a good read. Is it the most popular book out there right now? Probably not. So I just ask that you guys like, favorite, share.